To start, in a New York Minute drops tomorrow on all streaming platforms. What should audiences know about each of your characters and what drew you to this project? Amy, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I play Amy Chen. My name is Amy Chang, so that was already kind of a draw right there. And she is a food editor who has recently suffered from a relationship breakup, and that manifests itself in an eating disorder. Meanwhile, she's dealing with an annoying coworker and her parents' expectations for her future.
I play a character named Nina, and she is a daughter by day that helped her parents in a clothes shop and an escort by night. And you find out that she's saving up her money to help pay for her dad's medical bills and try to find her own freedom.
New York is a melting pot, and we've seen other projects that are based and set in this city, but never depicted in this way, which has been a mission for both of you as artists to bring more authenticity and diverse storytelling to the forefront. Why do you think it's taken the industry so long to get here? And is there an added sense of pressure and responsibility for each of you?
I was saying that, like, to multiple people, that if you pluck out these characters in this film and plug them in with different, people of color, plug them in with Caucasian actors, it still works. It's a very universal story.
Yeah.
And what makes a difference is that people don't like to tell story in a people of color perspective a lot of times. And in a New York Minute just shows three Asian women living their lives in New York City. And a part of it is the background of this is New York that we don't really see on TV, right? Or films. It's not the glamorous, Times Square. I don't think we have a single shot in Times Square in this film. So we have local neighborhoods in Brooklyn, local neighborhoods in Queens, and local neighborhoods in Manhattan that it hardly ever gets featured on film. And I think that makes this project also special. If you want to see what the neighborhoods of New York City is, when it's not all like show tunes and Broadway, and again, like I was saying, these characters are special because anyone can relate to it. You don't have to be Asian. And I feel like we need to tell more of these stories where, hey, these experiences can happen to multiple people across the board. And why we took so long to get here is, Hollywood throughout the years have thought only Caucasian stories or certain types of stories can make money. And this film getting distribution it's already a huge step. And now the next step is for the audience to support it, to talk about it. Hopefully we get a fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, so we can get some, stamps of approval. And even you guys interviewing us and wanting to talk about this film is already a huge step for an indie film. And we just need to keep pushing the boundaries and support each other.
And Kevin, I'll just tag on to that with regarding your question about why it's taking us a while. I think we're seeing a lot more decision makers, people of color being in the decision-making positions. So we have people of color in as producers, as writers, as directors. And it's just, I think these things just take time, but I feel like we've gone through waves where things seem like they're progressing. I think some of us will remember Joy Luck Club. I think at that time when that came out, everybody's like, okay, yes, Asians and Asian Americans are making it on the scene, but it takes a while. The ball has to get rolling. Thank goodness for those in the past who have brought us to this point, and we got to just keep the momentum going. And I think, this film was shot before Crazy Rich Asians came out, but we've seen the past few years, we've seen Crazy Rich Asians, we've seen Shang-Chi, all these films that Hollywood is taking notice that, yes, people want to see these stories of diversity. And to Celia's point that, yes, they are universal, they have universal themes, but at the same time, there are specific calls to our cultural heritage. It's not front and center, but you pick up on things about our characters, the food that they eat, or the way they relate to their parents. So I think those are things that work in our film's favor towards making it approachable to a wide audience.
Segue to this next question, but something that I think this film does brilliantly is it depicts the generational nuances between your characters and their parents, particularly their mothers, and this idea of expectation and Asian guilt. What was it like collaborating with your fellow actors when bringing those dynamics to life? And did you draw on any personal experiences when shaping these characters?
Amy, your mom is the coolest in this film, so why don't you talk about her first?
Yeah, so Chang is, so many people might recognize her as having been Jade Fox from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but she's also had a very illustrious career. And we were very honored to have her be on set with us. And I got to play with her as my mother. So in terms of personal relationships, I actually drew more on my relationship with my dad in terms of how Amy relates to her mother in this story, meaning that there is this cultural expectation that, so for instance, Amy Chen, my character, was born in San Francisco. She's an American born Chinese. For me personally, I was born in Taiwan, but our family moved to the US when I was 4. So I grew up very much entrenched in American culture, what that meant at the time for us. And my parents very much wanted us to assimilate and learn English without an accent. And that was kind of the priority, is just to become an American, right? And so it's, for Amy and for myself personally, it was about juggling the wish to pursue the American dream, to individualism and personal achievement, but balancing that also with respecting your parents and the sacrifices that they made for us to be here, and trying to find a way to meet their expectations while still being true to yourself. I drew on my own personal experiences with that. And then my dad is very much a worrywart. And you see the scenes with Amy and her mom, where her mom is, like worried about her living in the city by herself, and isn't it expensive there, and all these things. And these are conversations that I definitely had with my dad when I first told him I was moving to New York.
I guess for me is Yang, who plays my mom, is a friend of mine, a longtime friend of mine. So when I saw her at our callbacks and they put us together, and she was like, oh, "It's you. You need to get up on your face." I'm like, "All right, get up on my face, yo." So and like, automatically we have a type of chemistry, and and we're comfortable with each other, right? We don't feel like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, like I don't know if I can do this," and that discussion. Like Yam's like, "You're Celia, I know what to do." And like the cool thing is, like my parents wasn't like what Nina parents are like, but Yan was telling me how her mom treated her was basically how she portrayed my mom in the film. Mm-hmm. And she was like, my mom was really mean and really, really tough on me, and saying that I'm not good enough for this, I'm not good enough for that. And she was like, "Whew, I'm just channeling my mom." And I was like, I was like, "I need to give you a hug." I'm like, "I'm sorry." I was like, "You turned out great. You're awesome." And I was like, "I love you." And she was like, "Yeah, a lot of that, came from her experiences growing up in America with like a really harsh mom." And I was like, "But that's your real mom." I'm like, "You're playing my stepmom." And she's like, "Yeah, and I can go one step further and be meaner to you, Celia." So like usually in the scene when you see these tense moments between Yan and I, the second they call cut, I'm like, "Hey!" Their action, like.
You two do such a brilliant job in the film, and audiences are going to connect with your character's struggles and the way that you both portray it. As actors, just how do you create the space for yourself to dive into those more emotional moments?
I think it's different for every project. Sometimes music can definitely be an influence, having a specific soundtrack maybe that my character would listen to, or just affect her mood in that particular moment. I also tend to create imaginary circumstances beforehand and kind of immerse myself in that prior to the scene.
For me, Mandy actually gave me some homework to do to watch this film. And she was like, "There's this lead character in this Hong Kong film that I think resonates with how Nina's feeling. Can you watch the film and do a little character study?" It's like, "Of course." Now keep in mind, I was talking to her over Skype while I was in Atlanta shooting another show alone in my hotel room. And she did not tell me that this is a scary thriller. I was watching this film in the middle of the night, freaking out, covers over my head the whole night. And I'm like, no, every little sound I'm hearing, I'm like, "Oh my God, it's about this young girl." Like you see in the movie, like she's like searching, like run away from home, but she's like trying to search for herself. And then you realize towards the end of the movie, the detective that's been trying to find her, quote unquote, finds her and she's like cut up into pieces and they got decapitated. And I was like, well, Mandy didn't tell me that. Well, I was like, is that gonna happen to Nina? And she's like, no, Nina's not gonna get cut up in pieces. I'm like, oh, I'm really scared right now in the hotel room. Every little sound, it was like lock the door, all the bolts and locks. I'm like, okay, cool. And aside from that, like what Amy was saying, like in my acting training, my teacher always taught us to always build, try to imagine where this character is coming in from in the scene. And then he was like, imagine everything that you're walking through, you're seeing, you're touching in the scene before you do it. So then everything feels familiar and you're not experiencing it for the first time. You're like, oh, this is home. So yeah.
And with the film dropping tomorrow on streaming platforms, is there a scene that you're particularly excited for your fans to see? You both have so many standout moments, but I want to know if there's a particular scene.
Oh, wow, that's a good question. There were a lot of fun scenes in there. Celia, do you have one that comes to mind immediately? Because I'm gonna go
okay.
through.
I have one that's fun behind the scene story. I mean, I think on screen you're like, oh my God, this is such a sweet moment. All the moments between like Roger and I, we call ourselves the Disney couple on set because Roger and I love to sing Disney songs. And every time they're like, action, we're like, oh, lovey-dovey, cut. I'm like, a whole new world. And then Roger would jump in, he starts singing. And then our sound mixer, Victor, he's like, oh, I got you guys again. And I remember there's a scene like, the last scene we shot for our segment was a scene where you see Nina and Ian kiss finally on the food truck, inside the food truck. And I remember it was like doing a take after take. They were just like, are you guys ready for this? I'm like, yeah, we're ready for this. And then Roger's like, oh, let me chew some gum, make sure I don't stink. I'm like, all right, let me chew some gum, making sure, I don't have like bad breath or anything. We did like, I think 3 or 4 takes in. They're like, oh, there's this generator sound. We can't stop. We don't know how to muffle it. Like we might have to do ADR. And they're like, oh, is there a way we can like fix the sound here? And then they're like, okay, do 2 more takes and we can't get it. Just, this is it. We'll wrap it. By take, I think 6 or something around there, the sound was still going. And then they're like, okay, action. And then Roger and I was just being silly in between takes. And then we're like poking each other. I'm like, oh, okay, we have to kiss now. We started doing our scene talking. We're getting closer and closer. We're kissing. And then I was like, this is a really awfully long take. And then I literally went from this profile and go, what are you guys doing? And everyone just like busted out laughing. And they're like, oh, actually, we were wondering how long it would take for you guys to notice that we already backed up the camera all the way back so we don't see you guys anymore. And we're like, damn it, because it was something that we were joking around the whole time in the film. And we're like, we fell for you guys. And then Roger and I just started laughing. And they're like, yeah, that's the last take, we're done. Right when they're like, we're done, we're wrapping, they're like, actually, this our gaffer ran in. He's like, we figured a way. We can turn the generators off. And they're like, one more take, please. And we're like, okay. And the last take is the take that you guys saw on screen.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I would say, speaking of kisses, this is not the most memorable for me, but it did stand out. The kiss between me and my partner is Jay Shin. He plays Peter, the coworker who obnoxiously stalks Amy. And there is a scene where they kiss, and it has to be one of the most awkward on-screen kisses I have ever seen, and definitely the most awkward I've ever been a part of. Also, I think the scene that stands out to me is actually when Amy's company is shooting a scene in Nina's family restaurant, and her family owns a pho restaurant, and so she is playing a couple with Peter, and they have to talk about the first time that they had pho, and the date, describing the date. And it's a super cheesy, over dramatized story, and it just makes me think of all those dating shows where people are talking about how dramatic things are, and it was just super cheesy. And then Amy ends up fainting shortly after that, so obviously the stress got to her.
You were both talking about this earlier, but when the film was making its way around the festival circuit, there was this initial misconception that this is a film that's only going to appeal to the Asian community, which I think is something that a lot of Asian-centric films and televisions programs face. While it does certainly appeal to the Asian community, it is a universal story. How do we start changing these perspectives?
You know what? I think a perfect example right now is Everything Everywhere All at Once, right? You have a Michelle Yeoh film, and it centers a Chinese family and their experiences, and then her jumping to multi-universe, right? But in the core of it, it's a story about a mom who's unhappy in her marriage, who doesn't know how to communicate with her daughter, and it's starting to fall apart with her husband, and then her husband trying to hold everything in. Now let me ask you a question. Let's take away all the little nuances about, like, like Chinese cultural, like the New Year scenes and all that. Plug that into any characters, any ethnicity. We are human. We all experience same type of emotions. We have the same types of anxiety and guilt within us, like, and like we go through the same things. And I think, you know what, it's time for us to open a door, not just in Hollywood, all over the world. Is we're human and we have human stories. Why can we, for years, we've related to films growing up, like, oh yeah, they're non-Asian characters, but I relate to their stories. Why? Because they're teenagers, dealing with boyfriends and girlfriends in school. And we're like, oh yeah, we're in teenagers dealing with boyfriends and girlfriends in school and friends and all these drama and all the stuff that's happening in our school teams. Why can we only relate to people on screen when it's only one ethnicity, and you change it and people are like, oh, it's not relatable? Like another film that came out recently was Turning Red, and I've seen some of the critics was like, oh yeah, it's an Asian based story. I'm like, swap her out with someone else. It's a story about a coming of age girl feeling awkward, don't know what to do, and trying to satisfy her parents, meanwhile being big fangirls of this band called Four Towns. Meanwhile, it's like, I was a kid, I was fanning out of like the Backstreet Boys and the NSYNC and like all of these boy bands. And I was like, that is so relatable. I don't think you have to be Asian to relate to that. Yes, they're making dumplings at home. If you're Italian, I'm sure you're making pasta at home and gnocchis, right? If you're Russian, you might be making potato dumplings, right? So why is it hard to relate to? In the end of it, everything is a core human story.
Right. Tagging on to what Celia is saying, I think just the universal threads of what is it that each of us is searching for. We're searching for love, we're searching for understanding, we're searching for a connection. Those are themes that anyone can relate to. And I think you can definitely find that in New York Minute. And that's a reason why our film should be able to translate to any audience. But also with that, I want to highlight the uniqueness of these women's stories as well, because, and I think hopefully this introduces some things about Chinese culture that are incidental. It doesn't affect necessarily who they are at the core as human beings, but there are things that make them special, right? And so if people can pick up on some of these things in the films, and maybe somebody has never had pho. I can't imagine, but I love pho. But maybe someone seeing this film has never had pho before, and maybe this will encourage them to go out and try some pho and just learn something new, and maybe learn something about the culture. And hopefully this movie will encourage that too, so that we have more cultural appreciation and acceptance, because I think ultimately it's about understanding each other and appreciating the differences, but realizing that at the core we're all searching for the same things.
Yeah, beautifully said. And with so many timely and universal themes within this film, was there one in particular that hit home for each of you? And what do you hope audiences take away after they see it?
I personally just want the audience to, so this film has three very different female characters and going through three different scenarios that's very different in life. In the outside, we might just judge someone by its cover and be like, oh, okay, you know, Nina's an escort, so I assume XYZ about her. And I hope that in this movie they learn characters who they see in real life that might be close to Nina, close to Amy, close to Angel. They will have more empathy towards them and understand where they're coming from. Why aren't they willing to speak up? Why aren't they willing to do certain things? And instead of just judging them and be like, they're so and so, this is why, talk to them, actually understand them and have more empathy. I think the world right now needs most is love and empathy and understanding.
And then I would say from Amy's story that her struggle is that there's a part of herself that she isn't willing to share with the world, that she's afraid to share with the world. And so she's operating from a place of fear. And it's when she embraces this part of herself and has the courage to pursue the love that she wants, that she's able to fully hope for happiness. Like you see her become hopeful rather than operating from this place of fear. And so I think hopefully this can encourage people to try to move away from going through life from a place of fear and moving towards trying new things and accepting themselves for who they are, finding the beauty in that.